Hello and welcome to another sysadmin tutorials video. Today's video we're going to be exploring the VMware Data Protection. So the Data Protection is now powered by EMC's Avamar and is designed to protect smaller environments up to about 2 terabytes or 100 VMs. For larger environments you would want to deploy multiple vSphere Data Protection appliances. A few cool things about vSphere Data Protection is that it's very easy to set up, provides deduplication, and the performance to backup and restore a full VM image is quite fast. So in this video tutorial we're going to be deploying the vSphere Data Protection appliance, and to do that it's just an OVF file again. We need to download the OVF file image from the VMware website. You'll see it comes in 3 different flavors, in a 500 gig flavor, 1 terabyte and 2 terabyte. So the one that we're going to be using in this tutorial is going to be the 500 gigabyte one, and I've already downloaded that. So we'll begin to deploy the appliance. If I click on File and Deploy OVF Template, and you can see it's already selected here, but if I click on Browse, you can see here this is the name of my OVA file, and you can see it's using the 500 gig version of the data protection. So I'll click Open, and I'll click Next. As you can see here, the publisher is EMC. And I'm going to be thin provisioning this appliance, so it'll be only using 6.4 gig. However, if you were to thick provision it, it'll use 868 gig. And I'll click Next here. And we'll accept the end user license agreement and click Next. And I'll leave the default name for my appliance, my virtual machine, as vSphere Data Protection. And we'll be deploying it in VM Lab Primary Data Center. So I'll click Next. And I'll select my VM ESXi1 host and click Next. And for the resource pool, we'll be putting it in appliances in the V app here. I'll click Next. And then for the storage, I'll be installing it into VMware_datastore1 and click Next. And disk format is thin provision. The appliance will be installed onto NetApp NFS volume, which is thin provisioned itself. So therefore, on this screen, we won't be able to select any of the thick provisioning options. So we're forced to use thin provisioning. So I'll click Next. And for network mapping, I'm just going to be placing them in the VM network, which is just on my VLAN 1 on my lab network. And I'll click Next. And here we'll type in the IP address for the default gateway, which on my network is 192.168.1.1. The domain name server for this VM, I've only got one DNS server on my lab network, so I'll just type in 192.168.1.100. And the IP address for my appliance will be 192.168.1.125. And netmask will be 255.255.255.0. So we'll click Next here. And it gives just a summary of our settings that we've put in during the wizard. So if you're happy with all that, just click Finish and our virtual machine appliance will start to deploy. And the virtual machine has deployed successfully. So we'll close this, expand appliances, and we'll power on our vSphere Data Protection virtual machine. Okay, so now that the server's started, as you can see on the screen here, we need to go into our web browser and browse to the IP address that we set up in the wizard, followed by the port 8543/vdp-configure. So I'll open up my browser and browse to the URL. We'll just continue to the site. And here we're presented with our username and password for the appliance. So the default password is change me, and click login. And we're presented with our vSphere Data Protection configuration wizard. So we'll click Next here. And in this screen, we just want to verify that our IP address setting, netmask, and gateway is correct, as well as our DNS server. And for the host name, I'm just going to give mine hostname VDP. and my domain is vmlab.local. So just before we click next, you need to make sure that your host name and domain name resolve in DNS, as it's going to try to do a forward and reverse lookup on vdp.vmlab.local. So just click next once you've verified that. And we'll be just selecting our time zone. For me it's Australia, Sydney, and we'll click next. In this screen we'll enter in a new password for the VDP appliance. As you can see, there's some prerequisites for the password. It must be 9 characters, include 1 uppercase letter, 1 lowercase letter, 1 number, and no special characters. So I'm going to enter in my password here. So once you've got the green light on everything, click next. In this screen it's asking for our vCenter information. So we'll need to enter in a username and password that has administrator credentials on our vCenter server. I'm going to enter in my vCenter service account, which actually is a member of administrators and has full rights to our vCenter server. I'm going to enter in the password, my vCenter hostname, and my SSO hostname. And we'll click test connection, and the connection's tested successfully, so we'll click OK, and we'll click next. So the wizard's completed. As you can see here, when the changes have been applied, a system reboot will be required. So we'll click finish and let that get underway. So the configuration is completed, and as you can see here, we have to manually reboot the appliance. So we'll just click OK. We'll close the browser, and we'll just right click on our appliance, power, and restart guest. Reboot, yes. And the appliance will begin to reboot. Okay, and our vSphere Data Protection Appliance is now back up and running. Okay, so there's 2 areas for vSphere Data Protection. So let's just show you the first area and what we can do in that. So if we go back into our Internet Explorer browser, and we browse to the web page that we were at before, which in my case is my IP address and the port 8543/VDP-configure, and continue past the certificate. And here looks like the same page that we were at before. So I'll just put in my password. Okay, and in this screen, what we can see is our vSphere Data Protection services. As you can see here, we can stop and start them. On the right hand side, we have the log collector. So clicking collect logs will collect logs for the core VDP service, management service, file system service, and file level restore service. And if we click on the configuration tab, we've got all our IP and network information on the left hand side. On the right hand side we have our vCenter registration information, and down the bottom on the right we can change the time zone and also change our VDP password. If we click on rollback, so in VDP what we can do is we can actually take a snapshot of the data protection appliance, and on this screen here we have the capability to select a previous checkpoint and roll back to that version. And moving on to the last one, the upgrade tab. The upgrade tab provides us with an area where we can upgrade our appliance to a newer version. So I'll log out of our VDP/configure, and let's make our way over to the vSphere web interface. We'll accept the certificate. Okay, so in my vSphere web client, I'm going to be logging in with my administrator account. And put my password. And our vSphere data protection is all controlled through the vSphere web client. So as you can see on the left hand side here, if we click on vSphere data protection, I'll have a list of VDP appliances here that I can connect to. So my vSphere Data Protection appliance is basically called vSphere Data Protection, And here I'll just click connect. And in this screen we're just brought to the Getting Started tab. So it tells you a little bit about vSphere data protection here, and we've got some quick links to create a backup job, restore a VM, see an overview, etc. So let's have a look through the tabs here. If we click on backup, you'll see I don't have any backup jobs scheduled or enabled at the moment. So I'll just click OK. So here we can create new backup jobs, edit, delete, enable, disable, and backup now. If we go to restore, basically we'll be able to restore from our backup jobs. If we click on reports, and you can see here the state of the virtual machine, the backup job that backed up the virtual machine, the last successful backup, status, last backup date, etc. And if we click on configuration, we can see here some information about the backup appliance, IP address, versions, time, vCenter server that it's connected to. And on the right hand side, it's our storage summary of how much capacity we've got left on this vSphere data protection appliance. So remember back to the beginning, guys, I'm only using the 500 gig version, but it also comes in versions all the way up to a maximum of 2 terabytes. And if we click on the email button here, we can enable email reports to be sent out, and we can send them out at specific times and also on specific days. So I don't have an email server set up in my lab, so I won't be configuring any of that, but it's pretty straightforward. I'm pretty sure you guys will be fine with that one. But let's jump in and kick off a backup, and let's see this working live. So if I just jump into my vCenter server, I'll just show you we're going to be backing up this Windows 2008 Web 1 server. At the moment I've just got it powered off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to power my Windows 2008 web server on. And this is the virtual machine that we're going to be backing up. And our Windows 2008 Web 1's booted up now. So let's jump back into our web client and let's create our first backup job. So I'll click on new. Alright, and we'll just expand our vCenter server and our data center, our ESXi host, our vApp, and we'll select here our virtual machine Win 2008 Web 1. And I'll click next. So in this screen we can set our schedule. So we can set it to backup daily, weekly, or on specific days of every month. So you've got first, second, third, fourth, last, and the days of the week here. So I'll just select daily for mine and click next. And on this screen we've got our retention policy. And as you can see, there's a couple of options here. So we can keep the backup forever. We can keep it for X amount of days. We can keep it until a specific date, or we can use a specific schedule. So for dailies, we can keep for X amount of days, weeks, months, years. For weeklies, specific number of days, weeks, months, years also. Same thing for monthly, and for yearly, also the same. In my demo here, I'm just going to select keep for 1 day, and I'll click next. And we'll just give our backup job a name. So I'll name mine Windows 2008 Web 1 Backup, and we'll click next. And this screen will just show a review of your settings, and if you're happy with this, we'll click finish. And our backup job has been created successfully, and you can see it here in the list. So now that we've got our backup job here in our list, let's manually do a backup. So as you can see here, the next runtime will be at 8 PM. However, I don't want to wait until that time. So I'm just going to click backup now and initiate a manual backup. And we'll back up all sources. So the backup request has been issued, and we'll click OK. And if we click on running on the right hand side here under recent tasks, you can see here that the backup job has begun and the tasks that are running. So we're creating a virtual machine snapshot currently. And if we jump into vSphere, into our vCenter client, we can see here the backup job in our recent tasks. So that's this one here. So either window we can see the status of the backup, and I might just pause the video and wait until the backup job is completed, and then we'll return and continue. Okay, and our backup is complete. And we're back in vSphere web client. And as you can see, our Windows 2008 Web 1 server has one success backup here. And if we go to reports, we can see the status of our backup job here is success. And the date of the last backup displayed right here in this column. And also up the top here, recent successful backups is 1. So here we've got a successful backup of our virtual machine. So what we're going to be doing now is just jumping into our vSphere client. We're going to be going into our server. We're going to delete our server off the system. So I'll just right click and delete from disk. Yes. And once that's been deleted from the disk, we're going to go back into our vSphere data protection and run a restore. Okay, our server's been deleted off the system and from our data store, so it no longer exists. So I'm going to jump back into our vSphere web client and into the data protection section. And we're going to click on the restore tab. And on the restore tab here, you can see that we've got our Windows 2008 Web 1, and the date and time of the backup, and also the path of the backup of where it did exist. So I'm going to select this and I want to restore that. So I'm going to click restore. And it brings up the restore wizard. So we've got our virtual machine restored here. And if we have multiple backups, we'll have a list of all the different dates and times down here. So because we've only got one, we've got that selected, and that is the latest here. So we'll click next. And in this window, it'll just ask us our destination of where we want to restore the virtual machine to. So we'll just select our vCenter server and expand our data center, our host, and our vApp. So we'll just be putting it back into the server's vApp. We'll click OK. And for the data store, we'll just drop that down and we'll select VMware _data store 1 and we'll click next. And in this window, we've got a very brief summary of our restore options listed here. Let's just go ahead and click finish and we'll begin the restore. So the restore was successfully initiated. We'll click OK. And if we go into our vCenter server, you'll see here that the restore job is underway. And this will take some time, so while we're waiting for this to restore, what I might do is just pause the video and come back once it's completed. And we're back. And as you can see, the virtual machine has been restored here. I forgot to change the name of the virtual machine during the restore job, so therefore we see the date and time afterwards, but we can easily just change the name of the virtual machine back to what it was of Win 2008 Web 1. So all that's left to do is go ahead and power it on and you will be right to go. So thank you very much for watching this video on vSphere data protection. I hope that you enjoyed it and found it very beneficial. For more tutorials like this, be sure to visit my YouTube channel, Sysadmin Tutorials, and also visit my website on www.sysadmintutorials.com. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in our next video.